I disagree with the idea because for me there are so many alternative ways to produce food like agricultural farming. So I guess we can already provide one of our basic needs, which is food. For me, food is considered as a birthright because it's not something that we want, it's something that we need, and I don't think that a price should be placed on something so important that's been here ever since the start of humanity.
Friends, as you all know, that privatization is defined as it is something shifting from shifting of a government organization or any government undertaken industry to any corporate sector. That is privatization. Nowadays, every government in the world want its all money or all its taxes to be reduced. Everything they want to privatize each and every sector. So the question is that is that going to help us or our government? But I think that yes, of course, privatization is a good work in some of the sectors, but at the same time, it's very bad for some sectors to be privatized. Like you have, let's take an example, like education and like food. Coming to second question, they have asked about the few food and other necessities. Are they to be privatized or not? But I think, of course, you need not to be. It's given food and all things you need. It's a basic requirement. Food, clothing, and shelter. That is a basic requirement, and I don't think any person or any child deprived of basic facilities or anything he is not getting. If suppose he is not having, not belongs to a rich family, it is. I think it is a right for every child and every human being to have food and have shelter and have a good education, despite of his background and his belongings. So whatsoever background. So I don't think education and this food should be privatized at all. These are the things which comes under least privatization. So I think some sectors need to be privatized where there is a corruption and where you have to reduce the corruption, the amount of corruption. I'll give you this sanitary department and municipality department. This needs to be privatized. From my point of view, yes, this needs to be privatized because. Many of the workers have to be looked, and I don't think the government can provide such an infrastructure, such a officials to look upon each and every the worker working in any somewhere here roads or something. So I think they have to, these departments have to be privatized. And lastly, one more thing I want to say, that privatization is not an outcome for each and everything. It has to be under one's will to work for the to the better of government. Why don't we understand? This is in a democracy government. It is our government by us, government to us. So privatization is not a result, is a not a outcome or not a remedy for everything. You have to work in your own way to let the government function, and you have to. For things, you have to reduce your wastage, you have to reduce the government expenses. Suppose that you yourself are working in a government department, for that you keep your expenses low, you reduce your government expenses, and I think this is better than to privatize each and everything, rather than to have a strict action on every work under the government. So I think I'll sum up with that privatization is of course a good idea for some sectors, but at the same time for some sectors it is pronouncing like an absurdity for the sectors to be privatized. So I think basic facilities should never be privatized. It's an utmost this you call for an individual. It's an utmost to have all the basic facilities like education, clothing, and housing, whatsoever it may be, and every government should take action on this.
For me, privatization doesn't affect people in poverty because it already depends on the person if on how he or she would live her life. according to certain theorists and economists, there's no perfect system, so it's kind of normal that we can't really accommodate all levels in society. But morally, of course, it's wrong.
Certainly, I was put on with this question that we are having so much, there is sufficient for need, sufficient for everyone, but still, then why we are having such a poverty line? So we have discussed, we have departments discussing about the poverty. Why do we have that? If we have everything, abundant of everything, so the gap between the rich and the poor has to be shortened. This is a question regarding this: is privatization privatization responsible for the gap between poor and rich, or is it a remedy for to reduce the gap between the poor and rich? Of course, I will go with the statement that privatization is one of the factors for maintaining a gap between the poor and rich. Yes, because when you privatize certain things, the gap, of course, the gap between the rich and the poor widens, because privatization itself means you're handling something from government to a private organization. So of course the charges are increased. Yes, I do agree with this, that the quality, what quality you get, what things you get, and in which condition they get, that is of course increased. But at the same time, I think that certain things are there which are equally needed for, suppose, let's take a furthest example. There is a food. Me, you, and even a poor cannot live without a food. We require food to eat for meeting our basic requirement. So what happens is that when we are going to any private sector to buy a food, of course it is, the price is increased. The quality you get is far much more better than what you get in a governmental organization. But at the same time, the poorest of you have to think about the poorest. You can't get good food. He can't even, the person who is managing to make his boats and meat during the day can't get food. So that is something we have to think about. So privatization, at the same time, in some departments, like the that in the department, like you have electricity department, there I think it needs to be privatized, because the government is looking after many sectors in society. So at the same time, it can't look upon the basic sectors of human, what are the human index, the classification of human index, the basic sectors for that. It can't have a strong foothold on each and every department for to a department to function it very smoothly. So I think it is mandatory for the government to privatize certain sectors, like you have electricity. It need to be privatization. At the same time, the electricity cost would be increased, but the quality you get of electricity and the electric fluctuations are reduced, so is your appliances are saved. So I think this department needs to be privatized, and some department, of course, the smooth functioning of some departments need to be privatized. At the same time, I don't think the health department, of course, at all need to be privatized, because health is a basic facility and amenity for each and everyone, and despite of his background or whatsoever family he belongs, maybe poor or rich, health is something which I think it's inborn it's something which is to be given to every individual. So I think food, health, and education sector also, it can't be prioritized. And in privatization sector, there is also one point I wanted to discuss, that it is controlled. Privatization is always controlled by an individual or a group of individual. It is you are shifting a government organization to an individual. You are giving it to an individual. So the individual person is becoming richer, and the gap is widening between poor and richer. So I think the government should look upon the privatization, and only those sectors need to be privatized which are in the government can't handle itself on its own. And I think yes, government needs to be look upon this matter, and that's it.
I don't agree with it because oxygen is one of the basic needs. It's in basic needs or necessity of person. No. I don't think if ever the government will privatize oxygen, because it's something that comes naturally, and there was movie where they did the Lorax, and because they privatized oxygen, all the trees died because that's where oxygen comes from. And why would they even try to privatize it? That it's been here ever since the beginning of time. I mean, there was no price for it a long time ago. Why would they start pricing it now?
Hypothetical hypothesis is a master of all standard sciences. So the answer is that oxygen would be if there would have been any monopoly of over the oxygen. Yes, the world leading countries like America and Russia, most probably the America, they would have monopolized this oxygen, and other poorer countries, they have to pay for the oxygen. So I think yes, it would be, if oxygen would be given to any private ownership, or it would be privatized, then there would have been certainly a very serious issue, and continuous world wars against every country for acquiring the oxygen. So I think yes, it's better the God has created in its own way that oxygen is free to everyone, and it cannot be monopolized and hegemonized by anyone.
I would really want to have a resource-based economy, but since most of us are too abusive in our resources, I would still push through privatization of some resources. I guess some resources. It would take a lot of work because there's no perfect system. And we're already having trouble with the inequality and stuff. And we're going to think about the Venus project, which is like a different story and is a lot harder. It would be good because we would be able to identify the things we need and the things that we want, because today we tend to be blinded by the value of things because of how much they cost, and we think that the more money, the more valuable things are. So if that would be abolished, then we would be um, it would be clarified that the things we want are not really the things that we need.
Resource-based economy is the economy based on resources, that you are using resources only, and you are paying for only the cost of extraction. You are not paying extra taxes and all taxation what we are doing today. So I think God gave everything for need but not for the greed. So we all are at the same time we are suffering from poverty and hunger. At the same time, many of our resources can be generated. It is our government has hegemonized many sectors, with the cooperation of private sector. It has hegemonized many industries. Many sectors have been privatized. So I think instead of privatization of sectors, it should focus more on producing the resources, and many of the resources can be produced. Working with the multinational companies and all that is just creating a gap between the rich and the poor. Instead, it should focus on the poor, and technical skills and small scale industries should be brought up. That's why it can reduce the privatization. I think village industries should be promoted, and taxation regarding to village industries should be reduced, and village industries should be promoted, and more resources should be generated. Like we have agriculture products, and for us humans, for the group and the public, one thing we should all cultivate in ourselves, that we should always go for something which is produced by and manufactured by village, or it's a socio based economy, the work by group of individuals. Not a single person should be benefited. So I think it's better to generate resources than to run for privatization. So yes, I'll go for this.